Going to work is unfortunately something none of us can avoid, and after everything that I've been remembering the past few nights, I might just join the military to avoid it. My name is Clara, for the record, and I will never work in a mall ever again. Going into my store every day came with its challenges. Most of them didn't begin until the customers started to pour in from the food court. But this day was special. This day was way different. I went, opened and closed the gate as normal, and clocked in on the main computer. I glanced over and saw that my store manager left a note for me. Kind of odd, but not entirely unusual considering it's Phil. I had worked in that store for over a year, and he still did not understand how to schedule. I'm going out of town for the day for a company meeting. Kick butt today and don't forget to go through and change out some of the displays. Phil. I sighed. That was his job, not mine. Another Philism for the books, I said aloud to myself. I completed the rest of my daily opening duties before I moved onto the extra stuff that Phil was pushing off onto me. I went over and grabbed the clothes pole so I could take down everything I had put up previously. Reaching the pole up in the air, I tried to hook onto the hanger. Of course, it wasn't easy. It was never easy. I finally caught one and wrangled it off the post like a bear catching a salmon. I sighed again, realizing that I had nothing to hang this stuff on until I put it away. Small inconveniences make for big frustrations, I said aloud to myself again. I hated going to the back room alone. I walked into the back, singing a little song to myself, like a child who's afraid of the dark. This was the dark, and I am the child. I'll still admit it. I made my way to the back corner where the rolling racks were stored, and as I placed my hand on the cold metal of the bar, I realized that the lights that were normally motion sensitive hadn't turned on yet. You've got to be kidding me. I tried to pull the rack out of its cubby quicker after the gain of this knowledge. This would happen when I'm already scared. The rack stuck onto the wheels of the many other racks in the corner and refused to let go from its metallic friends. Forget it. I let go of the rack and hustled up to the motion sensor on the light. I stood there for a moment and started to flail my arms in the air rapidly to try and get it to turn on. Nothing worked, so I had no choice but to pull my phone flashlight out to solve the problem at hand. The electrical work could wait for another day. I walked back to the back corner of the room with the flashlight neatly tucked in the front of my jeans so that I had full use of my hands. As I bent down to grab a hold of the wheels in order to detangle the metal, I heard a small settling of something behind me. Not a metallic sound, but more of a piece of wet cloth dropping to the concrete ground. An alarm set off in my head. I began singing again. That was the only thing that seemed to calm me down, but I still wouldn't look behind me to see what it was. With a clang, the pieces of metal finally came undone, and the rack finally came loose. I rolled it out of the room, specifically pointing my back towards the sound. As I led the rack back out into the storefront, I looked over to the fire exit door that led to a small courtyard outside. The door had a bright red bar across the handle to let you know the alarm will sound as soon as you walk out. That was normal. The door was closed as normal, however. There was one thing that was strange. There was no light coming through the peephole of the door. I rushed back out into the front of the store, panting from not only running, but also just from the quick shock that I had gotten. I checked the clock. It's 11 a.m. Time to open up. An hour or so went by, and there still had not been a single customer in my store. Actually, there have been like no customers, besides the same groups of 2 or 3 elderly people fast walking around the mall corridors. The security guards and all the other workers are there as normal. I look out into the food court just to make sure. I stood in my entryway for a moment, being sure that I wasn't imagining things. It was, indeed, the same people over and over and over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's it? I asked. After a few more minutes of standing behind the cash register, mulling that number 16 over in my head and glancing back into the doorway of the back room, I figured I should keep myself busy with the rest of the displays Phil told me to change. I picked the pole back up, put it into position, and returned to my routine. 10 minutes went by, still no customers, and I found myself leaning more into the music I had been playing than before, perhaps trying to keep my mind from thinking too much. 20 minutes went by, and as I was replacing the display at the top, I heard it. The exact thing that I was subconsciously afraid of. A voice. A small, faint voice. It sounded delighted in tone and seemed to only come out in a high-pitched squeal. This time, I did turn around, my whole body twisted toward the origin of the sound and, of course, nothing. Absolutely no one to be seen. I held my breath, then thought for a minute, and I exhaled again, thinking that maybe I was still wheezing from the cold I had prior. What do they call that? Grasping at straws? It took me a little bit to finally gain the courage to go back to the wall and continue the display. It was 3 p.m. By the time I finally decided to finish it, we closed at 7 p.m. I walked back over, pole in my hand, and I began putting clothes up and taking clothes down, even getting sucked into the puzzle of shelving for a little bit. Seemingly, everything weird had stopped happening, and I could finally focus on this damn display. Still, no customers. I went out to the food court again, 16. Bending down, I retrieved the last shelf from the floor and put it into place, looking underneath as I lined the pegs up with the holes in the shelf. Standing back up and taking a step back by a shirt rounder, I appreciated what I had just achieved, and metaphorically and physically pat myself on the back. I walked back in front of the wall and grabbed the pole from the shelf I had leaned it up on. As I reached for the pole, I felt, on the back of my shirt, a reach for me. A small wave of a grasp that wasn't entirely successful. I gasped without thinking and spun around for a second time. Within this motion, I heard another small voice, a laugh this time. A chuckle, it seemed, too human to be what I saw in that moment. Peeking through the gap in the shirts, a young girl smiled up at me. She seemed to be around 7 years old, but with extremely aging wrinkles around the sides of her eyes and deeply dark bags beneath them. Dirt caking the teeth that were looming out from behind her dry, cracked lips. Sat in a stout crouch in the middle of the rounder, she held her arms out to me as if to give me a hug. The smell that permeated from her underarms as she raised them to me was a stench I could never forget. It still lingers in my nose. The smell of death, disease, and of matter decaying with every breath she took. Tissue sloughing off her cheeks as she smiled at me. I stepped back. She smiled again, put her arms back down by her side, and ran off into the back room of my store. I called Phil. August 28th, 5:30 p.m. Phil has done nothing but laugh at me, so I'm leaving. This is the one thing I'm writing down in order to try to get everything out into the open. I'm done with the store and whatever it has to offer. I'm doing exactly what everyone in the movies doesn't do, but should. He can laugh all he wants. I am not dealing with that. I'm calling security. Sergeant Stintz came to my rescue at that moment. Stintz was a small, round, and slightly uptight older man. Many people in the mall hated him because of that, but I always chalked it up to it being because he was bald. I told him about the peephole and the weird sounds. I even told him about the girl woman and how there hadn't been more than 16 people in the food court all day, him included. I asked him to go to the other side of the mall and find out more information. I didn't know what else to do. I closed the store gate at 6:30 p.m., which gave me some time to go around to other stores and see if they experienced anything strange, besides, of course, the lack of new customers. I walked up to all 3 restaurants in the food court, and they all gave me the same vacant smile, blank and soulless eye contact, and they all seemed to follow the same script. "Thank you for coming. Have a nice day," with a closing, dirt-covered smile, before turning away, dropping the smile to an almost melancholy frown and getting back to their tasks. I went to the stores next door to my own, hoping that there would be some sort of normalcy there. We had become pretty friendly due to being so close to each other. I walked into the first store, and at first I didn't see anyone at all, not a single soul. I thought maybe they had closed their store as well. Maybe they also thought some weird stuff was going on. But everything else was normal, music going, cash registers still logged into Catherine. No manager would leave their store like this. I walked around for a minute and noticed nothing else of substance, and decided to go to the store on the other side of mine. I finally saw people again. I replayed in my head, "Please be real, please be real." Whatever that meant, I had no idea. I walked up to Megan, a longtime manager of the store. She was bent over putting away displays of lamps and their boxes. I said her name, faintly but loud enough for her to hear, to no avail. I decided to tap her on the shoulder. Megan turned around. As her body rotated towards me, I could see the beginning of what was a smile. Muddy teeth careening from her face and lips pinned back to her ears with passionate glee. The same dark wrinkles and bags that were apparent on the girl were apparent on Megan. I jumped back. "Thank you for coming. Have a nice day." She turned back around and continued to do her task. As Megan, or this other form of Megan, continued back to her duty, a sharp screech came from what sounded like the back room of Megan's store. I will say though, if it's anything like my back room, I wanted very little to do with it. I headed back there anyway. As I started sprinting towards the back of Megan's store, I could hear her putting all of the boxes down, and slowly footsteps began to follow me to the back. "Excuse me, that area is for employees only. Please make your way to the exit." Anger grew in Megan's voice each time she repeated the phrase. I made my way to the back room. Unlike my back room, theirs had a door. Without looking back or even thinking twice, I slammed the door shut and pushed anything I could find in front of it. She didn't stop following me, although her actions didn't become hostile either, only her words grew with anger. She politely knocked on the door, and after a while, she stopped talking and just knocked on the door. I turned around, feeling secure in the room that I was trapped in. I walked into the room more, and quickly found that there was a staircase leading up to another level of the room. A scream pierced the air again, and this time I was solidified in my answer by going up there. I made it to the top of the staircase and walked down a long, slender, and dimly lit hallway. One door was visible to me at the very end, a flicker of light blinking underneath the door as if to invite me in. Another scream was cast through the air. The door was completely shut when I walked up to it. I tried to slowly open the doorknob, but it let out a terrifying moan. I froze and looked around me, hoping no one would be led to my area. I peered into the room after a minute or two and saw Sarah, Megan's employee, tied up to the boiler in the corner of the room, slashes and cuts smeared across her chest. Her shirt barely hung off her shoulders due to the trauma cast upon her. She was turned away from me, her face pressed up against the wall. I whispered her name. She turned her head towards me, and as she did, there were two purple swollen sockets where her eyes should have been. "Sarah. Clara, you should not be here." She shakes her head. Somehow her eyes were still able to cry. "Clara, I'm here to help you. Hold still so I can get the rope off." I moved closer to her, trying to get my hands on the knot of the rope. She started to squirm. "Clara, I know you're scared, Sarah. I'm sorry. I promise I'm not one of them, okay?" She stopped moving. Her head slowly moved up to look at me, still making eye contact. "Sarah, one of who?" "Clara, what do you mean?" "Clara, I mean one of these fucks who hurt you, okay? I'm not going to hurt you." I reached out to untie her again. She pulled from me. "Sarah, how do I know that? How do I know they didn't do that to you too?" "Clara, Sarah, please, I'm begging you. Let me get you out of here." "Sarah, Don't touch me, you freak. You are one of those things that did this. You are. She started laughing now. Not a humorous laugh. More of a laugh someone expels when they've truly given up. As Sarah laughed, I began to hear footsteps down the hallway and a faint, "Thank you for coming, have a nice day," echoing into the room. I scooched back, trying to push my back up against the wall as tight as I could, so maybe they wouldn't see me behind the door. There was no other place to hide. They swung the door open, luckily not closing it behind them. "Thank you for coming, have a nice day," they said as they entered the room. It was two men, one that worked at the shoe store on the other side of the mall, and the other was wearing a mask. Another, "Thank you for coming, have a nice day," was expelled from the mall employee, and an uncommon "up you go" came from the other. I let out a slight gasp when I heard this. They stood Sarah up on her feet. Her legs were barely able to hold her weight. The two men spun her around, and the masked man plunged an elbow into the middle of her back, forcing her to stand up straight. I gasped again. I watched as the masked man grabbed Sarah's face by the chin, turned her to face him, and spit in her swollen face. Masked man, that's what you get for trying to get in my way. He smacked her across the face. His spit flew off of her lips as he hit her. And that's for just being a bitch. Mark. Thank you for coming. Have a nice day. The mall employee, Mark, I think his name was, followed suit with spit to Sarah's face, followed by a deep smack. The smile never left his wrinkled and deformed face. Masked man. I found your stash, sweetheart. I don't know how you thought you could do this to me. To me. Really? I mean, it's kind of biological if you think about it. Even without seeing me, you can tell that men are inherently stronger than women. It's just science, babe. He shrugged and pulled out a large butcher's knife from the waist of his pants. I kind of feel like a real-life villain right now. Haha, this is one of a kind, truly. Thank you for making this possible. He grabbed Sarah's face again and made her turn towards him, this time kissing her. She tried to pull away, but his grip was too tight along her jawline. Masked man. See? I told you I'm just stronger. With the last word leaving his lips, he plunged the knife into the top of Sarah's kneecap and sliced clockwise, nearly exposing bone. If you really think you're strong, prove it to me. Another laugh expelled from his chest as he completed the circle around Sarah's knee, now showing bone. I began to feel sick. My stomach turned and twisted like I was the one being cut. I felt the pain in my legs and even in my chest. It was nothing I had ever felt before. The masked man finished the job on the other leg, but that's what I gathered from Sarah's cries of horror. I couldn't bring myself to look at her. Masked man. Now, sweet Sarah, what is one thing you need from me before I leave you be? Sarah, who are you? And why can you talk to me when the others can't? She asked through her sobs in pain. I still couldn't look at her. Masked man. He laughs. Oh, my dear child. If I told you that, I'd have to kill you. Ha ha ha. I saw his mask be cast aside in front of the door. There was a brief pause. Oh, ha ha. I guess that didn't help you, huh? He bursted out into laughter, just barely cut off by Sarah. Sarah. I said, who the fuck are you? Her screams were louder now, as if she had tried to move towards him. Masked man. Well, if you insist. He shrugged. He raised the knife and slammed it down through the floorboard, assumingly pinning Sarah to it. I heard the crash of the wood and the bellowing cries of Sarah as he laughed again. I'm surprised you can't tell by the sound of my voice. I mean, with how long we worked together. It stints, you fucking dunce. Night-night, sweet Sarah. I started to peek back around the door when I heard another slam of something into the floorboards. Sarah's once full and wholehearted screams were now nothing more than weak whimpers. Footsteps led out, Sarah went silent, as did the room. I still didn't want to believe what I just heard. Stints? So, was he looking for me now too? Sarah. Poor fucking Sarah. Damn it. I could have stopped him. I could have done anything, although I wasn't quite sure if she was worth giving my life for. What am I saying? This is sick. I left the room and made my way back down the stairs and into the original back room. I see that this store also had a fire exit door in the back. I let myself out. Unlike our store, this back door led to a small corridor that connected the different major parts of the building, not outside. Why couldn't it have led outside? The lights were incredibly dim, a pale yellow. The walls were a grimy eggshell color, and the floors were concrete. My footsteps echoed as I made my way through, unsure as to where this corridor would lead me. I saw a large double metal door at the end of the hall. The crack between the door, dark however, no light could be seen. As I made my way towards the double doors, I began to smell a sweet but sour smell coming from the door left of the double doors. It should have been what led to one of the few restaurants within the food court. It said so on the door. I turned, suddenly losing my objective out of pure curiosity, the same thing that killed the cat. I grabbed the handle to the door, took a deep breath, and pulled. The smell wafted towards me as I opened the door. It was truly petrifying. As the smell of what could only be described as rotten flesh hit me in the face, 2 restaurant workers were laid out, still, in front of me. A dirty smile creeped across their faces as my eyes glanced over them, dissipating as I closed the door. I turned away, not truly capturing what happened, and made my way towards the double doors once more, the smell of rot still in my nose. With everything that had happened so far, I had no idea how to even process what was happening at this point. I pushed through the second set of doors, instinctively putting on the ear-to-ear grin, wiping it off, then putting it back on. What was I doing? This was probably how everyone in there became one of those things. I know this now and can even justify it as trying to blend in. There was no one there. I looked both ways and noticed, still, no one there. I saw the exit, the one thing that I could actually focus on. I checked left and right one more time, no one, and made a break for it. I reached the doors. Stints. Where do you think you're headed, lady? I listened but didn't let him influence my decision. I was getting out of there. I grabbed the door handle and got into the passageway before actually stepping outside. I went to grab the other door handle. Stints. I asked you, where are you going? He grabbed me by the collar of my shirt and raised me into the air. He turned to make me face him and spit in my face, much like he did Sarah. He was going to kill me. He took me back inside the mall, this time locking the exit doors, and threw me over the counter of a food court restaurant, landing me upon the 2 previously executed workers. I searched around me for anything that I could possibly find to stop him. I thought about what he had said to Sarah and how I couldn't be the one to prove him right. I tried to stumble to my feet as I felt a gaze on the back of my head. I managed to get to my knees before looking up and met the eyeline of not just Mark and Stints, but the girl woman, Megan, and the 4 other food court employees I had seen prior in the day. All peeked at me from over the counter, their wrinkled and decrepit fingers snuck over the edge of the table. Their fingernails chipped and shattered away as they gripped the wood. Stints came from around the counter, through the side doors, and knelt beside me. Stints, do you understand what's going on here yet? He tapped the same knife he used to kill Sarah on the tile next to me. We here want to run a smooth and tight-knit community of hard-working employees, Miss Clara. And you, Sarah, and a few others, as you can see. He took the knife and poked at the bodies below me as if it were a dead animal. Don't really fit the bill. They, however, are perfect for the gig. He gestured behind him to the gaggle of degenerates that were caressing the counter. You do have to understand that we must let go of you now, right? No hard feelings? He chuckled and looked at me deep in my eyes. I should have gotten up and ran right then, but it was almost like he had me in a trance of some sort. After what felt like hours, I finally gained the courage to stand and run. I dashed past Stints through the side doors of the restaurant, feeling a sharp pain on my scalp as I got slightly past him. I was face to face with him again, with a fistful of my hair being the only thing giving him power over me. Before I knew it, I began to cry. I didn't want to show him my weakness, nor did I want him to have any more power over me than he already did. But it couldn't be stopped. Stints. There, sweet Clara. No need to cry. It is just a job after all. No need to fret. He wiped a tear from my face and lifted my chin to look at him. Smile for me, will you? He said, soft and arguably sincere. I did. Thank you, he said. I closed my eyes as I smiled at him, feeling the tears start to dissipate. An electric ache shot through the side of my face as I sat with my eyes closed. I couldn't place exactly where the pain was coming from, but I knew then that that wouldn't be the end of the pain. Another twinge of pain shot up from my hands, left then right. I was dropped to the ground again, a cacophony of, "Thank you for coming, have a nice day," erupted as I grasped at the cold tile beneath me, feeling blood rush from my palms. It all went black. I woke up, felt my legs being grasped and dragged as my head bounced off the concrete ground. I looked around to see myself within the back rooms of the mall. I looked up to see who was in control of me, and I couldn't make out who it was in front of me. Maybe due to my eyesight still being blurry from the pain, or due to the multitude of concussions I'd gained through my journey on the ground. "Hello?" I managed to say. Without looking at me, the voice replied, shaky yet strong. "Are you okay, Clara? I don't know what the fuck is happening here, but I'm really glad I decided to come in." It was Philip. "I appreciate your help, but I can walk," I said, feeling his hands let go of my ankles. "Shit, sorry, I didn't know how else to do that." As I stood to my feet, Phil grabbed my hand and dragged me out the emergency exit. It led to the same courtyard our exit led into. Phil still didn't let go. Instead, he dragged me to his car, parked in the farthest corner from the mall, and shoved me in through the passenger side door. "We're going to the hospital," he said. It all went black again. I woke up again, this time in a hospital room. I heard the beeps and buzzes from around me and saw the wires attached to every limb. No one here but Phil. "What did you tell them?" I asked, afraid of him telling them the truth, but just as terrified of him not saying anything at all. "A car accident," he replied. "I told them I found you on the side of the road on my way home from work. And here we are." I sighed, as did he. My dinner came. I've been awake now for about 3 days, and I can't get the sight of my palms or the pain I felt out of my head. The smiles and sounds I had been tormented with the whole time will now be infecting my every move forever. I hate thinking about the fact that they're there while I'm writing this today.